But welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for recognizing the signs of grooming, protecting children and youth from sexual abuse. So, who is Mission West Virginia? Those of you who have been with us for a while, we did revamp our intro a little bit. I'm excited for today. Mission West Virginia helps youth and families build brighter futures. We support families in foster care and provide life skills education that helps teens make healthy, informed choices. We work closely with schools, social services, and community partners across the state. You can learn more at missionwv.org. We do that through three main programs, the first one being Frameworks. Our Frameworks program helps individuals interested in foster or kinship care. We explain the process, connect families with placement agencies, and help them prepare to support a child in their home. If you want to learn more about becoming a foster adoptive parent, please give us a call here at the office, 866-CALL-MWV or 304-512-0555. You can also request a packet of information on our website. The Bridge program would be the second program we have. Bridge guides foster care students towards their education goals. We support more than 500 students each year with educational advocacy, mentoring, enrichment activities, college funding support, post-secondary planning, and more. Students show consistent improvement in attendance, behavior, and grades, and every high school senior continues on to a post-secondary plan. The THINK program, which is sponsoring today's webinar, equips teens with the skills they need to make healthy choices about relationships, substances, and their futures. Our curriculum is evidence-based and designed to meet the real pressures teens face. Our educators are highly trained, vetted, and supported through on-site observations, pre-post surveys, teacher and student feedback, and this helps ensure the program stays consistent, effective, and responsive to student needs. We will be providing 1.5 contact hours for social work CEUs through this program today. The provider number is 490-129. I will post more information about that in the chat. Attendance is automatically verified through your Zoom login. Certificates will be delivered through Simple Cert. Please take note of that. It will not come from Mission West Virginia. If you do not receive it in the next few days, please check your spam folder. If you still haven't received it, then just contact us here at Mission West Virginia and we will get that certificate out to you. So let's meet our speaker today. Dr. Deborah H. Young is an associate professor and BSW program director in the Marshall University Department of Social Work, where she develops and delivers generalist and advanced social work courses in face-to-face and online formats. Her research centers on family and community violence with an emphasis on child sexual abuse and incest, sexual victimization, and the long-term impacts of early sexual trauma on adult sexual behavior and relationships. A highly experienced presenter, Dr. Young has delivered more than 100 workshops and conference presentations at the state, regional, national, and international levels, translating complex empirical research into accessible, practice-focused content for social workers, educators, mental health professionals, and community partners. We are so excited to have you today and grateful for you sharing your time with us. So welcome. I'm going to stop share and
Well, thank you for having me. That
hand it
sounded
over.
fancy.
You are fancy.
I
We're
guess I'm
excited.
fancy. I'm West Virginian with the fancy for
We love
sure,
it.
but that's okay. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Young as Hillary, correct? Um, as we were talking about, I'm at a weird lighting issue here, so hopefully you can see me pretty well. We're going to be looking at a PowerPoint mainly anyway, just to get you through so that you can see what's happening and what I'm talking about. But I do have the black turtleneck on, so I look like the Queen guys in the Bohemian Rhapsody. I didn't realize that until I got on screen. So feel free to ask questions in your chat, and that will be something that will be monitored, and hopefully we will be able to get your questions answered. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? I'm hopeful. Okay.
I can see on
Okay.
my end, so it should
All
be
right.
good.
So it's just the whole PowerPoint is just there. All right.
Yes.
All right, so this is recognizing the signs of grooming. This is a training that I put together for the NASW conference a couple of years ago, and then was invited to present at the ACES conference this past summer. And it seemed to have gone over very well because Mission West Virginia reached out to me and said, hey, can you do it for us? And I said, sure. One of the things that I talk about a lot is violence. And so it's something that unfortunately is a part of our lives. It runs across the lifespan. It is exactly what we think it is in all different aspects. But one aspect that we don't necessarily talk about all the time is grooming and what grooming means and how it happens and who the victims are. So, as you can see from the agenda, you will see that I'm going to define grooming. We will talk about the victims and we'll look at that from the perspective of the ecological systems perspective, which is the micro, meso, macro perspective for those of you who aren't familiar with that. And we'll really look at some of the microsystemic factors that contribute and the macrosystemic factors that contribute to victims being victims. We'll also talk about perpetrators as well and how to recognize some of the signs. There are a couple different things. We have a couple of brief videos that we would like for you to watch. If we can get them to play, and if not, I'll explain what they're all about. So we will get through this and learn all about grooming. According to Terry and Talon, as cited in one of the textbooks that I've used in class multiple times before, grooming is a premeditated behavior intended to manipulate the potential victim into complying with sexual abuse. Okay, a slightly different perspective makes the use of the terminology modus operandi or MO to characterize grooming, and it's the act can be defined also as the action taken by an offender to perpetrate the offense successfully. So the ultimate goal is sexual interaction with the child, sometimes with the entire family. And so there are things that I'm going to be talking about that is uncomfortable for folks. So when we talk about the grooming dynamic, we're looking at victims and offenders. And offenders will resort to a range of coercive tactics to reach their goals. This truly is coercion in its truest, clearest form, because there are tactics of seduction and enticement or verbal intimidation and fear. And it's very clear that this person, if you know what you're looking for, and that's what this training is all about, is when you recognize those signs, you start to see those puzzle pieces put into place. And so there's a dynamic that goes with it. And the first is trust. And I'll go over these several times in several different ways, but basically the offender is looking for someone who is in some essence weak. These are vulnerable kids, right? And all kids are vulnerable, but they are looking at gaining the trust of the potential victim and their caregivers by methodically inserting themselves into their lives. Okay. And so the first step obviously is identifying the victim. And when you identify the victim, they're looking at kids who have easily broken down defenses. Those tactics are directed at the youth victim, the victim itself, themselves, but also the parents, the community members, the caregivers. If we think about some famous unfortunate things that have happened, think of Sandusky and that trusted coach in Pennsylvania who was convicted. Also, the women's gymnastics coach, that recent situation, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head, but he was the doctor that would take care of the girls as they were training for the Olympics and being part of the Olympic team. I just watched a documentary about Ohio State University and the physician for the Ohio State men's teams there and how he would groom them and trust them and use his role as a doctor to force them into situations where they would have to have physicals all the time. And those physicals immediately started with they had to get naked. And so they got to the point where they were comfortable with him being naked, and then it went from there. And so I'm going to do my best not to get into graphic detail, but one of the things that you have to remember with this is that this is a person that is slowly taking pieces away from their victims' comfort and making them more and more comfortable with them versus family members or friends or other folks who might say this behavior is not okay. Okay, because it helps the perpetrator gain access to the victim in ways where they can ground the relationship in secrecy, so that they are less likely to be discovered. And when we talk about perpetrators and who those perpetrators can be, a lot of the times folks are surprised that it's somebody we know. And it's somebody that is oftentimes in a, what's the word I'm looking for? Powerful position, or influential position. That's the word I would rather use, such as a teacher or a pastor, a police officer, a trusted friend of the family. It may even be a family member. And so this enables the perpetrator to exploit the child because they hold that power in the relationship. It can be age, it can be status, it can be experience, it can be as general as just size alone and strength. And that power differential is manipulated to gain the trust and subsequently coerce that child into a sexual relationship of some form. This is not happening in all cases of child sexual abuse. Oftentimes there is no trust, or it's only coercion or just sheer fear. Grooming is a specific part of, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Grooming is a specific part of child sexual abuse, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen for sexual abuse to happen. Okay. So let's talk about the victims. And you heard me say earlier that victims could be youth, but they could also be family. And keep in mind that boys, girls, and parents or caregivers can be victims. In recent literature about sexual abuse, more attention is given to girl victims than boy victims. And the likelihood of that is because it is there's a social stigma there and more social mores for boys. Boys are less likely to report abuse and less likely to label it as abuse, especially if it's a sexual experience. In 2015, the statistics are always behind. The National Center for Victims of Crime report that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim. I believe those numbers are higher probably now. And 1 in 10 children is a victim. And so if you are in a room with a group of kids, the likelihood that one of those 20 kids or 2 are being sexually groomed or sexually abused is pretty high. 72% of victims are white, 23% are Latino, 20% Black. Self-report studies show that 20% of adult females and 5 to 10% of adult males recall a childhood sexual assault or sexual abuse incident. So these are just some statistics to kind of give you an idea of how frequent this happens. During a 1-year period in the United States, 16% of youth aged 14 to 17 had been sexually victimized. And over the course of a lifetime, 28% of youth aged 14 to 17 had been victimized. Children are the most vulnerable, and the most vulnerable ages for child sexual abuse is 7 to 13. So it starts pretty young, and it kind of tapers off when the child oftentimes is able to fight back. That doesn't mean that it ends, though. LGBTQIA plus youth are 4 times as likely to report child sexual abuse than heterosexual children, and about 1 in 4 transgender youth are abused before their 18th birthday. Other victims are children with disabilities. Those children are 3 to 8 times more likely to be abused because of than their non-disabled peers, and it's basically because a lot of them can't report, or because they have cognitive delay and don't necessarily understand that having an adult want to have a relationship with them is not something that is okay. There is some differences in sexual abuse experiences for boys and girls that are very much based on the gender of the victim. Boys are more likely to be older when their abuse begins. A lot of the times with boys, it is a non-family member who is in an influential position, such as a coach, a priest, a family friend, or a teacher. and they are very likely to have a woman as their perpetrator. One of the things that we tend to do in a microsystemic perspective is we forget that adult women having sexual relationships with teenage boys is child sexual abuse, because we have a different perspective. Not everybody feels this way. So please don't slam me in the comments of that's not, nobody feels that way. Many people feel that way. For example, when the situation happened here in, well, not here, I'm actually in Cabell County, but in Kanawha County with the teacher at one of our middle schools who was sending nudes and snapping and seducing and enticing middle school aged boys. She was a former Miss Kentucky. So this was a very beautiful woman who was doing this. And I will never forget that I'm on Facebook. And of course, I'm the demographic for Facebook. I'm a middle-aged woman. I'm a beyond middle-aged woman. So I'm reading through and people are posting about it and talking about it. And one of my friends said, but look at her. And it made me so angry because, yeah, she's beautiful, but there are beautiful men out there who seduce young girls and boys all the time as well. And I said, this is still sexual abuse. You are wrong. And we're not friends anymore. And that's okay. We don't need to be friends if that's the way you feel. But we can't forget that there are women who are perpetrators. And we tend to forget that a lot because we see this offender in the male role more than anything else. And unfortunately, in all aspects of crime, men are more likely to be the offender than a woman. But in all aspects of crime, women also can be offenders or criminals. So I'm not, I want to make it clear that this isn't just a man-driven offender thing, that women can be offenders, but men are more likely to be offenders. One of the videos, if I can get it to work, is about, hang
The
on.
worst
Can you
state
hear?
to live in right now is West Virginia.
That's great. Can you hear? Okay, great. So just to give you a little context, this is obviously not this ad that we're going to watch, but this is a video. It's an Entertainment Tonight kind of blip with Jan Broberg. And if you've never heard of Jan Broberg, she is the victim of a family friend and the documentary Abducted in Plain Sight. If you've not watched Abducted in Plain Sight, I'm going to spoil it for you. Jan's perpetrator was a friend of the family. He was very close with the entire group, mom, dad, siblings, and Jan. He targeted Jan as his number one victim. It started when she was very young. She was around 6. And he told her that if they did not have sexual relations and continue the human race, that aliens would come down and abduct them. But where the title Abducted from Plain Sight comes from is her parents trusted this man so much that he picked her up and took her out of town, and they didn't even question it for several days because he was so close to them. And it was a different time, clearly. Most people are probably screaming in their head going, what? They took this kid and they didn't even know where she went. But yes, that's how trusted he was. Another thing to remember is he seduced both parents. And this is what she's talking about here is how her father felt about the incident between him and the perpetrator. And the mom also had a long-term affair with the perpetrator. So the whole family was seduced by this man, even to the point where he convinced them to build a separate bedroom in the home basement so that he and Jan could be together and sleep together as part of his rehabilitation. And it wasn't going to be sexual. They were just going to sleep in the same bed so he could avoid temptation. And they believed him. So I'm sorry if I spoiled the documentary for you. Please go back and watch it if you're still interested. Some of you have probably seen it. But this is just a quick blip of her talking about how her entire family was enticed by this man. And I want to say it's maybe I don't think it's Deborah Roberts, but the journalist is saying, but it's not the same, and it is. So,
Virginia, and nobody's talking about it. I spent 30 years.
Let's skip
My
him.
parents were groomed and manipulated for 2.5 years. This family they were our best friends. He was our best friend.
What do you want to say to the public who maybe like me
Right.
were saying out loud, are you kidding me? Why didn't these parents do more?
They would have done more if they had seen more. 2.5 years to build ultimate trust with individual members of a family is something that happens slowly, but it happens because you're frequently with those people. It's the 70s. They don't know what a pedophile is. So there is some naivety there. But my parents weren't stupid. You have to imagine the person that you would sign paperwork to say, if I die, you take care of my kids. That's how close we were to this family. So first of all, people don't want to believe that they aren't seeing something that's in their own family or in their own congregation or in their own neighborhood. But that's because we have a bias. The person we trust and love, we're not going to see the little subtle warning signs because we don't want to, first of all. So that's really the crux of that story.
I was talking to my mother about it, and she said, at the end of the day, there's no time I would ever let you go as a 12-year-old girl somewhere with a 40-year-old man. It just wouldn't happen.
You don't have an uncle or somebody in your family that you go, no, it's not different. See, that's what I'm saying. It's not different. That's what people want to believe, that this is different. It is not different. This is the person that you trust most, who's become like your second father. It is not some out of the blue thing. The favorite uncle, the favorite school teacher, the favorite guy at church that you're doing the service projects with, the favorite. And that's who this guy was.
Your dad has since passed away since the filming of this documentary. What do you think he would make of all of this?
My dad was such a good man, and he was so embarrassed that we never thought that he would talk about it on camera because it was just that one experience. But then, of course, Berchtold accused him of many other things. And I think he took the guilt and shame of that to his grave because,
You could see it on his face during the documentary.
Yeah.
You could see that it was the thing that really broke him.
Dads take it on. They're supposed to protect their little girls. He didn't see it. I don't think he ever fully forgave himself, even though I worked really hard at trying to help him see you were groomed and manipulated too. I have to just say, I'm kind of glad that he had bone cancer. We didn't want him to suffer anyway, but it would have been hard on him, to have all of the negative parts. But at the same time, he said, when we went and saw the documentary and a lot of his friends and family were there, and he said, I'm ready, because if my heart can help somebody else avoid doing something stupid, and maybe that will save their child's life, they don't even know it yet, but it might, then I'm okay with it. And my mom was the same way. She went back to school after all of us graduated and became a social worker.
Really?
Placed hundreds of kids in foster care, good foster homes and adoptive homes, and lobbied before Congress to get funding to open a center for missing and exploited children in Idaho and in Utah. So my mom and dad worked really hard to try to make up for their indiscretion, and not seeing what they eventually, of course, they saw. But they were sick and brokenhearted.
Do they understand why the public's reaction?
Oh, they do.
They do.
Yeah, they do. Because they've, I was such an idiot, or I was so stupid, or why couldn't we have seen, or why didn't we protect her and know so that she wouldn't have had to go through that? Yeah, they're my mom and dad. And if I had not had 12 amazing childhood years before I woke up in the back of that motorhome, where we ate dinner together every night. We talked. We were unconditionally loved. We were listened to. They communicated. When people say, what do I do? I'm like, sit down every day around a dinner table and eat dinner with your kids with no electronics. That's what you do, first of all, so that you build that relationship and that communication.
Okay. We don't need to go to Flavortown. All right. Let's stop there really quickly and see if there are any questions. I'm afraid if I pull up the chat, it's going to mess me up. Okay, I'm going to move on. So some of the things that make a child vulnerable. I think it's really important that we don't victim blame here, that should be kids, and kids should feel that they can trust adults and have non-custodial caring adults in their lives, meaning someone who is not required to take care of them because they are a parent, but they have that good person that they can joke with or laugh with and trust that they aren't going to hurt them or harm them in some way. But there are risk factors that make kids stand out. And microsystemically, so if we talk about what microsystemically means, it's one-on-one, or it's those small groups of families, and the problems and dynamics of families and the specific relationships between the perpetrator and a victim. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. One of that microsystemic vulnerable factor is transgenerational abuse. So this kind of is that adage of just bad things keep rolling. And so this creates this high risk that if the parent has a history of being sexually abused, there is a 3 times more likely risk of abuse of their children. So it becomes kind of a family norm at that point. And if you're not familiar with what a family norm is, it just becomes part of the roles and traditions and rules of our family. And so it is really disheartening. If someone, an adult, discloses that they've had a sexual abuse experience, that they have not received any help up to that point, because as therapists, as folks who are out there helping people every day, the thought you have to think, okay, have you abused as an adult and continued this behavior? And that's a very hard conversation to have with a client. They may disclose it, but a lot of the times there's so much shame associated with it and secrecy that they may not. But it is something that we do have to keep in the back of our heads. I'm not saying that every sexual abuse victim becomes a perpetrator, but there's like I said, a 3 times likelihood that it will happen. Other microsystemic factors are things like intimate partner violence in the relationship of the parents. If there are relationship issues in general, and I'm not saying just mom and dad bicker or mom and mom bicker, it's more of kind of rolling up to an IPV situation where there is a lot of strain on the family. Strain theory posits that people who are under immense strain of things like poverty, mental health, substance use, low levels of education, low income, all of those things put families at risk, either for intimate partner violence, child sexual abuse, child abuse and neglect, because they're so focused on the pressures that are put on them by poverty or their mental health or all of those other factors that are playing, that they break. And the breaking point, unfortunately, turns violent a lot of the times. So it could just go in the direction of common couple violence or terroristic IPV kinds of things, or sexual assault, marital rape, and sexual abuse of the children. Isolated families are at greater risk. So these are families who isolate themselves. We call these families closed family systems when we teach families in social work. These are the ones that have something to hide a lot of the times. They are clannish. They don't let others in. Friends don't come over because something is being kept secret. And it could be that, dad's an alcoholic, or mom has a substance use problem, or there is abuse happening around physical, sexual, or neglect kinds of things. There's embarrassment about the home. There's embarrassment about the family dynamic. So they close themselves off to protect themselves. And if they're isolated, if you're working with an isolated family, meaning they don't have people in their life outside of that circle of parent, child, and that's it, it's something to question. Doesn't mean that it's happening, but it's something to look at because it is a risk factor. Along with that are children who are left alone, unsupervised, or don't have the physical presence of numerous friends and neighbors. So again, that isolation, meaning they don't play with other kids in the neighborhood, which we don't see a lot of that as much as we did when I was growing up, just because of social media and devices and things like that. But these kids don't have devices. These kids are isolated because they are being protected by their perpetrator so that the secrecy can maintain. And so they are more vulnerable. This, in a child abuse situation, it makes me think of, oh shoot, I can't remember their names, but it was a family of, it was two women and they had adopted several children. And those kids were all over social media. They were this beautiful, diverse, lesbian couple with these biracial or multiracial children that they had adopted. And then, but what was happening at home was completely different. These kids did not have friends. They were homeschooled. They were starved. I mean, it just lots of different things were happening. And they are a perfect example of a family that was isolating, but still putting themselves out there to seem like they are kind of publicly on the radar. So it's like, well, we attend these events and all these wonderful things are happening. We're taking this great family vacation. So what we see on social media and what's really happening can be very dichotomous. And so this is for the home visitors. This is for the CPS workers. This is for those of us who are school social workers who suddenly start seeing less and less attendance. And then it's, well, I'm going to homeschool. And knowing full well this family may not have the capability to homeschool or the finances or the educational skill set. So those are red flags that you need to kind of monitor and make sure that it's kind of like the thought of mandated reporting. Mandated reporting is we report even if we suspect and it's not true versus not reporting and it becoming true. And it's kind of the same situation with these kids that you start to see becoming more and more isolated and not showing up, that kinds of stuff. Families who have domestic violence or IPV in the family unit or have a substance use issue are at higher risk, as are blended families. And when I talk about blended families, I'm talking about stepdaughters and stepsons. So bringing a child in from another relationship and making them vulnerable, and just by combining households can be a real issue. The stepdaughter is 7 times more likely to be a child sexual abuse victim than a biological daughter. And the stepfather is 5 times more likely to be the perpetrator. And then a biological father. And this theorizes is the theory behind this is incest inhibition, meaning that inhibition is lessened because the stepfather is not a natural or biologically related person. So the taboo that goes with that, the risk that comes with having a sexual relationship with a young woman who could become pregnant is not as great. We do see incest, intrafamilial incest of fathers and daughters, mothers and sons, but when it's a blended family, the risk is higher. Again, this doesn't mean that all blended families have child sexual abuse, but the risk is still there. And so, because of that incest inhibition, and because unfortunately, it's child sexual abuse happens. Girls who have never lived with a natural mother, meaning they've never had a biological mother. Their mother may have died in childbirth. They may be adopted. They may be in foster care from birth, kinds of things. That's what we mean by natural mothers, biological mother, are 3 times more likely to be victimized than girls who have who do live with a natural mother. And so I don't really like that particular term. Biological is the term I prefer, but that's kind of what the literature calls it, is a natural mother. If the mother is fully absent, meaning they're not there, unavailable emotionally, they are not effusive, they are distant, unaffectionate kinds of things, if the mother is sexually punitive, meaning that if the child is seen or caught masturbating or looking at maybe somebody in their underwear photos, maybe got caught looking at pornography online and they are punished for it. Like instead of discussing it as a natural occurrence of puberty and that type of thing, can be a risk factor. Other things like religious fanaticism, that I think is a spectrum, because religion is a spectrum for people, but religiously fanatic and really pushing that agenda. If the mom has less than a high school education, that can be a risk factor. If the mom isolates herself, meaning that she has some type of mental health disorder like depression, panic disorder, agoraphobia, alcoholism, or some type of physical or chronic illness that prevents them from being available, it is a higher risk. And it's the same with natural daughters who live with both parents. The mother is kind of the crux of the family in a lot of different cultures. And so these girls who don't have that, or they have a mom who's not absent or treats, normal puberty and sexual behavior as, against God or against whatever religion they have, or is dirty or shameful, puts the girl at a higher risk. So basically, microsystemically, it's the families that are disorganized. These are the families that Kirkpatrick calls level 1 families. Like their basic needs aren't being met. They are in crisis all the time. They are disorganized. They are dysfunctional. There are things that are going on there where it's chaos all the time. It also goes back to that strain theory, where the strain is so heavy of trying to make ends meet, trying to keep a roof over the head, trying to make sure that your man doesn't leave because you lose an income, or whatever. It's that disorganized, dysfunctional, chaotic, basic needs aren't being met, puts these kids at high risk for not only child sexual abuse, but for other forms of child maltreatment as well. If the family is characterized by father-daughter incest, those families tend to be more patriarchal in structure, meaning that children are subservient to the adults, particularly the dad. It's that mentality of wait till your dad gets home kind of thinking. And if there is a lack of intimacy between the parents. So say, for example, you have a mom who is there in the home, but the mom has, some type of chronic illness or substance use problem, and she is not fulfilling her role, meaning that she is not a partner to the father. That could be sexually, that could be intimacy in a lot of different ways. It can cause role and boundary confusion if the daughter is then put in that role. Sometimes we see this if it is a single father-daughter situation. Sometimes we see this if, mom, like I was saying, checks out in some way and is absent in some way after being there. This causes what we call effective enmeshment, poor adaptation, poor problem-solving skills, an inability to really understand their role and what the boundaries are between the role of being a daughter and then sometimes being a partner. And so you've heard that, well, you're the man of the house now, or you're the, mom's gone, so we need you to step up kind of thinking. That can take a turn really quickly in certain types of families. Poverty is obviously an indicator. Unfortunately, poverty is an indicator in a lot of different things, but poverty is also an indicator that can make a kid vulnerable. And then also those kids who do have devices and have access to the internet and have no supervision are at risk. And this is something that later on in the training I'll talk about and show a video about, if we have time, is about online grooming and how that happens. And it's very, very common, probably more common than you think, of young girls. They call it catfishing, being catfished by someone who is like, you're so pretty, or on social media or sending them a snap and they get, you know, a penis picture after 2 interactions kinds of things. And so it's this online grooming piece to get the child to meet them somewhere. And so we'll get to that in just a little bit. Macrosystemically, now remember when we talk about meso and macro is that really tight knit middle of the bullseye. Macro is our big communities and environments. And so these are the big kind of concepts that can make children vulnerable. And the first one is the sexualization of children in the media and elsewhere. The view of children as sexual beings. We don't think of children as sexual beings, those of us who don't have any type of paraphilia, but we use child models to be in sexual situations. One of the things that I use in my violence class that I teach in undergrad and grad is I've created a PowerPoint of vintage ads, and a couple of them in there, and some of you may remember this if you're old enough, loves baby soft perfume. And the tagline for that was innocence never felt so sexy. The model in one of those ads looks to be about 6 years old, maybe 7, 8 if we're lucky. This is a baby. The baby cheeks are there. Think JonBenet Ramsey level of cuteness and makeup and all of the things that unfortunately went with JonBenet. But it's that type of media sexualization of making, you know, we're not talking about films that are made for teens kinds of stuff, but we are seeing that if we compare films and TV shows and movies from when I grew up in the 80s to what my 15-year-old daughter, who is now growing up, sees, sex is now a very big part of that. And sex is a very natural thing. But when you have parents who don't see it as a very natural kind of developmental phase that older teens and young adults go through, and they're either punitive about it or they are getting deep into things that are super inappropriate, like hentai anime and some of the bestiality things and trafficking videos, that kind of stuff. What people don't tend to understand when it comes to the media is that with algorithms, if you start watching videos on YouTube, and if you had looked at the sidebar of Jan's video, you would have seen my video, my YouTube. I love pimple popping videos. I will watch them before I go to sleep because it causes me to have deep muscle relaxation. So it looks like it hurts so badly that I will tense up, and then I have to force myself to relax, and it puts me to sleep. And it's very weird, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. But if you were to look at my algorithm, like I'll set a sleep timer for 30 or 40 minutes, and the very next day, if I get on, everything that's suggested to me revolves around pimple popping, all the gross stuff that goes with that. It's the same thing if a child gets into some type of highly sexual anime or film or child sexual abuse media. I don't like the term child pornography because pornography is pleasurable for a lot of people who don't have paraphilia. But child sexual abuse media, that algorithm is going to continue to expose them to this stuff over and over and over again. And the number one social media site for kids is YouTube. And YouTube has a lot of great things that go with it, but it also has a lot of scary stuff out there that without supervision, kids can see, but also end up being a part of themselves. They will start to film themselves and share that too. So another is culture. Particularly, I'll use Appalachian culture as an example because I'm Appalachian and I see, I grew up like this and I see it now still today, is that children are property. You are my child, I own you, I can tell you what to do, I can tell you how to do it, and you don't have a place at the table until I say you do kind of mentality. And it's this entitlement of adults in Appalachian culture that children should be seen and not heard, and they don't really have a voice, and I own them, that can put these kids at risk. And there are other cultures like that as well. If there is some type of patriarchal or male entitlement type of culture that implements and provides the cultural sanctions, this is a red flag for sexual abuse sometimes as well, because it is acceptable in their culture. Again, as I was saying earlier, we don't think of children as sexual beings. We think of sexuality as an adult province, right? It's, that's what you do when you're grown up or when you're a young adult. And we don't really pay attention a lot of the times to things that would be harmful to children, particularly like YouTube and television. So if a child is constantly exposed to sexualization, they quickly mature and desensitize themselves to it. And that is part of the grooming dynamic, is desensitization to touch, that I'll get to in just a little bit. But just like violence, we are completely desensitized to violence. So much so to the point where we will, some of our #1 movies, if you saw the ad that popped up on Jan's video, it was about Scream #7 and all of that, of, people getting killed, people getting in dangerous situations, and we don't even think about it. But if you show me a video of somebody hurting an animal, I'm on the floor. And so it's just, our brains have adapted to desensitize ourselves. It's a defense mechanism that we put in place. And so what a perpetrator will do is oftentimes expose the child to sexual abuse material, some pornography, adult pornography. It might be child sexual abuse media types of things. And so they, just like the violence piece of it, they become desensitized to seeing adults with children, or children and children together. And having that stuff available is not only put the kid at risk, but it also may lead to adult sexual interest in children. The link is indirect. So you have to understand there is no empathy for the victim. These are little kids, and it's hurtful to them to be in a sexual relationship. But when you are desensitized to that empathy of watching it or seeing it over and over again, a child being sexually abused, that pain that they're experiencing, the fear that they're experiencing, you become desensitized to it as an adult, just like they become desensitized to seeing it all the time on TV. Some gender role things that we put in place. These are societal perceptions and norms of what we expect boys and girls to be. And so some of the gender roles that and we're getting better about this, are things, but there are things like girls being taught to please other people and, smile, be pretty. I believe there's another documentary out there about the, William Jeffers, and the affiliation, I'm going to assume, with the Mormon church. I might be wrong. Please bear with me. But keep sweet, pray, and obey. And they had to be sweet all the time. The women had to be sweet. They had to be clean. They had to be attractive. They had to, wear their hair a certain way. But we teach girls to be vulnerable. We teach girls to feel guilt and shame about their bodies. We tell them that, you have to be pretty versus smart. We tell them, use your body, use yourself in a way that will enable you to get what you need, to be manipulative. Tears are manipulative. Smiling and being cute and being a good girl. All of those things are societal perceptions of girls that are put in place, that we are just part of the fabric of who women become and who they are. And boys are taught similar things. Boys are taught to believe that they're powerful, which is a correlation with why boy victims are oftentimes older, because they are not to be seen as victims. They are participants a lot of the times. You're old enough to say no, you're strong, you could have pushed me off kind of thinking when the perpetrator gets caught. And so one of the fear tactics that the perpetrator will use is that fear of, if I react to this, like boys are going to have a physical reaction if they're simulated, they are now gay or homosexual, and they will begin to question their manhood. And it's manhood is very important, of being a guy's guy kind of thing. You be free, and your freedom will be repressed if it is reported. And they're taught that no one will believe them because it's cool to be initiated by a female, or it's so secretive, and so it can put them at such risk of losing their identity that they oftentimes will repress it. When I was watching the documentary about the Ohio State athletes, it was heartbreaking to watch these men who are my age, in their 50s now, who were sexually assaulted by this physician, who finally were able to say, yeah, that happened to me. And it took one actually saying it for others to come out, but it was just this kept secret that everybody was going to get felt up by this guy. They were going to have to be naked in front of him. It was almost like a rite of passage, and it was wrong. And when it finally clicked, this is wrong. These men were in their 50s, and to see them break down and cry and be vulnerable at that age and finally say, this really did happen to me. It's pretty powerful to watch. I believe that documentary is on HBO, maybe. So, all right, we're about halfway through. Does anybody have any pressing questions they want to ask or share? Like I said, I haven't pulled up the chat, but I'm happy to stop here and answer anything or talk about anything you might have questions about. It's a lot of information.
I don't see any questions other than were the slides supposed to be changing?
No,
Okay.
I'm one of those old school trainers that was taught the less on the
Same.
slide, the better. So no,
Same.
I'll talk about the same slide forever. So no, sorry.
Okay.
That's just the way I was taught to do it. Is the less information you put on a slide, the harder your audience has to listen. And so
I have to forcibly make myself make a PowerPoint so people can follow along or have something visual, I guess, to look at. I'm the same way. But
yeah,
I don't see any
so
questions. I think we're good to.
okay, sorry about that. I know it's people are like, come on, but what tends to happen, just as a little sidebar, is people get so invested in writing down everything that's on the slide, they miss really important parts. So that's what I was taught in my doc program, and that was my minor, was educational technology. And so it was driven home. The less on the slide, the better. So sorry. But here's one that's good for you. It's got a lot of information on there. And so who the perpetrators are. And as you can see, first and foremost, we have family member, teacher, family friend, coach, mentor, priest, pastor, an online predator, which I'll get to in just a little bit, a police officer, a security officer. Keep in mind that about 90% of children who are abused know who their perpetrator is, and 60% are acquaintances. So it's teachers, neighbors, community leaders, kinds of things. Only about 30% of children, which I shouldn't say only because 30 is still a pretty high number, are abused by their immediate or extended family. Excuse me. And only 10% are abused by a stranger. So more than 70% of children are abused by a peer. So it might be an older friend or a friend's older brother or sister who steps into that role. And like I was saying earlier, although a lot of the times when we conceptualize that the man or a male is the most likely perpetrator, we cannot forget that women abusers also exist. A lot of the times it is not told because it is a female to male perpetrator and it is that rite of passage, or it is a female to female perpetrator and the girl maybe had been having latent homosexual feelings already, or they're afraid that they again will will be labeled that way if they're not. So men are the majority, but women are 4.5 times more likely to offend against their biological children. Now, remember earlier I said that men typically don't. They lean toward stepdaughters, that incest inhibition. Okay. That's not the same for women perpetrators, and they will abuse their biological children 4 times more likely than men, because there's just a disparity there that victims may not perceive the abuse as abuse. It might be seen as normal family behavior. A lot of the times, the majority of the victims are male. And as we have talked about, I have talked about multiple times, boys delay reporting or don't report at all. And so they are less likely to be believed because of societal perceptions that women don't abuse. And then, of course, it's like I was saying earlier, that concept that, this is every guy's fantasy, is for this older woman to show them the ropes, basically, of what to do and what women like, and let me teach you how to pleasure every woman in your future while you take care of me right now. And so female perpetrated abuse has the same negative consequence on victims and is often compounded by mockery, shame, and downplaying of the abuse. So it's as bad, if not worse, if it is a female perpetrated abuse, because we tend to believe girls more. We villainize men. And there's this mockery of, just like I was talking about my friend on Facebook saying, but look at her. Wouldn't you? No, I would not want my 12-year-old son to be receiving naked pictures of his social studies teacher. No. And so they downplay the abuse a lot of the times. But there are lots of other roles that could be fulfilled here. But these are the ones, if you think about it, these are the ones that are also mandated reporters a lot of the times. And that's really disheartening to me, is the majority of perpetrators that we see outside of family members. It could be like a big brother, big sister situation, a social worker situation, police officer, priest, pastor, coach, mentor, camp counselor, teacher, after school care. All of those folks are mandated reporters, and they make up the majority of this list, which is really heartbreaking. So let's get into the deep stuff, which is, what are the signs of grooming? And I seem to be right on time, so I'm happy. The first step, and I'm going to go through the signs, which is identifying, trusting, playing, isolating, sharing, initiating, and controlling. And then I'm going to revisit it in the next one, which are the 7 P's of grooming, which are just pretty much the same, but looking at it with a different definition and maybe an easier way to remember. So the first sign of grooming is the identification of the victim. And I've talked a lot about what makes a victim vulnerable, but any child or teenager may be a potential victim. Depending on the predator, they may be attracted to children and youth with certain characteristics. They may target youth who have coexisting factors like vulnerable parents to facilitate the crime. It may be a crime of opportunity. As I go through this, I'm going to talk about a situation that when I grew up, what happened, just to give you an idea of the steps and how that happened. So the first step of identifying in my personal, it did not happen to me, is I went to school with a girl named Julia, and we had a teacher named Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith was our arts teacher. So he did all the talent shows and singing and dancing and plays and all the things that I lived for when I was that age. And I very clearly remember and I'm a junior high kid, so I very clearly remember when I started junior high and I made the school play, and my mom met Mr. Smith for the first time. She said, "Don't be alone with him." And I was like, "Whatever, Mom, he's a teacher." So, but she said, there's something about him. Don't ever be alone with him. Well, When I was in 8th grade, Julia, our victim, started 7th grade. Julia had a beautiful singing voice. Her voice was angelic. It was stunning. But Julia was also very poor. She was an only child. Her parents were very deeply religious. They both had low education attainment. So if we think of all of those factors that I talked about earlier that makes Julia vulnerable, they were there. And so bing, 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 victim, right? So the next step of the grooming process is to gain the trust and access to the child. So the perpetrator may observe them for a long time and assess their vulnerabilities to learn how to best approach and interact with the child. Well, Julia's singing voice and Mr. Smith's role as our performing arts dude, perfect match, right? So because she was shy and she was 12, 11, 12 in 7th grade, maybe 13, he became kind of her coach and mentor of, you have this voice, it needs to be shared. He would offer her special attention and time. She would always get to sing the finale of the talent show. He would give her rides home because both of her parents were trying to make ends meet. And so it was this kind of gaining the trust of the family. He became part of their family in that sense of, well, he's going to make her famous. He's going to help her, really foster her voice for our church and that kind of stuff. And her family trusted him. He was a teacher. It was the 80s. We didn't know what we know now. So he got in. And he got in. So then the next step, he continued to play a role in her life. And in the playing part of this, the playing the role part of this, the perpetrator manipulates the relationship so that it appears that he or she is the only one who fully understands that child or can meet that child's needs in a particular way. They also may exploit their empathy or convince the young person that they are the only one who understands them, and that they reinforce that the perpetrator's needs are what the child is the only one who understands that. And Mr. Smith did this with Julia in a couple of different ways. He played this role of mentor with her voice and all of that. But during the time that they were alone, he would talk with her about his poor marriage and how, he and his wife had been married for so long, they no longer had relations with each other. And, she was the one, he just couldn't help falling in love with her. And so these all roll together. And the next is isolating. So this is offering the rides. He would bring her, they would have special sessions of practice after school. I'll stay after school and I'll help you with your solo. And then I'll take you home, kinds of things. And so it's taking that child out of their surroundings in some way or another. He would take her to competitions and it would just be him and her, kinds of things for the day, and gain access to her alone. But keep in mind that isolation piece of it, that there are instances where perpetrators have been successful in molesting victims without detection while other adults are in the room. So it's not, that particular piece of it is important and it plays a role in it, but it's not necessary. So again, going back to my mom telling me never be alone with him, fast forward, I go to high school and Julia is still at the junior high. Mr. Smith is still at the junior high. Well, I go through my 10th grade year. Everything's great. I don't think about these two people ever again. Well, when I start my 11th grade year, Mr. Smith is now a teacher at my school and he's teaching biology. What? Okay. And he would then, but he also did the forensics, which is like the competition for public speaking and improvisation and dramatic reading kinds of stuff, and take kids to competitions. And again, my mom, I was going to a forensics competition. I was an improv kid, and we were sitting in the McDonald's parking lot. It was about 5:30 in the morning, and she said, "I'm telling you now, if there's no other kid in that car, you're not going." I was like, "Are you kidding me? Are we coming back to this again?" And she's like, and I was older, and so she just said, "I just don't trust him. I don't think that he's appropriate with girls. I no, if there are no other kids in the car, you're not going, and I will tell him that." And I was like, "Okay." I mean, she was so serious, and when you're a teenager, I have one. It's when you get serious with your teenager, they know. So there was this secrecy around their relationship. This is the sharing part, that there's private communication happening. At the time, it was probably notes and secret phone calls, kinds of things, but now it can be text messages or Snapchat or whatever. But there's communication that strengthens this relationship, but you can't tell anybody about it, because other people will be unhappy about it. So what Mr. Smith did with Julia is he basically said, "I have to disentangle myself from my marriage, but I don't want to leave you." So when she started high school, he followed her to the high school by getting a job in a field that he probably hadn't taught at all or in years. And so I don't know if he ever threatened her with suicide or disclosure or physical harm. His was more of the seduction and kind of enticement piece of it, of, "Look, we're still together. I will still help you. I will take over some of these things for performing arts in my role here," and continue the relationship going. But throughout that whole time, from the time they met up through the end of my story, he was initiating very slowly sexual contact with her. And so it starts with an established emotional connection, and that's through coercion or other tactics. But the ultimate goal is touch and sexual contact. So they will slowly initiate and desensitize the child to contact. It may begin, I don't know how it began with them, but with a lot of situations, it is casual. It's not overtly sexual. It might be gratifying for the perpetrator, but the kid is not aware by, like, "Hey, let me, you've pitched a really hard game. If you stay over for 30 minutes, I'll rub that shoulder out for you." And it's truly a massage. It's not, any situation of further than that, of just making sure that, the shoulder gets iced and the arm gets massaged and it's over. But what's happening is that coach is enabling that child to desensitize to their touch. It's okay for him to touch me because he's helping me with my pitching arm. Or if you're in the car together, a hand on the knee when you're telling a joke, or just like, "Hey, ha ha," slapping them on the shoulder kind of thing. It can start with a sidearm hug. Lots of different things, but the goal is to gradually start introducing more sexualized touching and breaking down those inhibitions of the child, so that they can eventually overtly touch the child. It will turn into a sexual relationship. With Julia and Mr. Smith, it was a love relationship. "I'm in love with you. I want to be with you. I want our lives to be together, but nobody can know until you graduate from high school." And so that's the last part, is he controlled the narrative by being with her at school every day. He was there. He followed her from junior high to high school so that he could keep his eye on her and control the secrecy of their relationship until she was legally of age. During that time, he did divorce his wife, and when she became 18 years old, they eloped and got married. And I found out about it I obviously was a year older, but worked with a young woman that we had all gone to high school together. And she said, "Hey, did you hear about Bob and Julia?" And I said, Bob so-and-so," because we had a couple Bobs in my class. And she's like, "No, Bob Smith, our teacher." And I said, "What about him?" She's like, "They got married and they're going to have a baby." He was 63 years old. She was 18. She never disclosed that they had a relationship until they got married. And this girl, this mutual person that told me about it, she swears she did not know until Julia called her and said, I married him. Because she was so under his thumb. And I'm not sure how she felt about it, like shame or blame, but that's a big piece of it for a lot of kids is they are shamed. You know, if you tell I will lose my job, if you tell we won't be able to be together, which may have been what he told her, is if you tell this is happening, I'll lose my job and we won't be able to get married and have a life together. There's some type of threat there. And that threat may seem harmless in the sense of, you know, if you can't tell, so we can be together every day at school, or it can be if you tell, I will kill your family. You're making me do this to you. And so you're the one that's going to pay the price for it. So it could be a variety of different ways of controlling, but they have to have the control because as soon as the relationship is disclosed, it's over. Meaning that, you know, if the child is believed, then it's going to stop. So if we go to the next slide, these are the 7 P's, and a lot of them are very much the same. And so the first is praise, and this is flattery. This is, again, gaining that trust and getting them comfortable of you look really pretty or handsome today. You should wear that outfit again. You should dress like that again. Your makeup looks great today. I love the smoky eye kind of thing. But they will play into the child if they deny being pretty, they or acting shy or have self-esteem vulnerability, they will play into that and kind of work that as a way to gain trust of no, I really do believe that you're beautiful. And this happens a lot with online grooming because they'll see a profile picture, might just be, you know, something weird. It's still, it might just even be like part of the face, but oh, you're so beautiful. I love the color of your eye. Or can I see your full face? Or, you know, can you show me just one of you? And this can happen as early as kids get social media. It can happen in, like I said, in schools and other things. Another P of grooming, excuse me, is precocious conversation. So this is a way to feel out the child to see if they're interested, meaning that they will start out asking if they have a boyfriend or girlfriend. What is that like? Have you ever kissed them? Have you ever had sex together? Tell me all the tea, spill all the tea about it. And so if the child starts to reveal those details, and a lot of the times kids will, especially if they're younger, because they feel like they are supposed to tell an adult, it will allow the predator to start the process of gaining that trust, as I was talking about. And the escalation might lead to asking the child, you know, to asking them things about what are you wearing? Will you be willing to tell me, you know, what you look like in your bathing suit? Did you get a new swimsuit for summer? Can you send me a picture of it? I'd really love to see you in your bikini, kinds of things. And then moving into conversation about masturbation, sexual behavior, sexual contact, showing or sharing links to pornography or child sexual abuse material. So it gets more and more, I don't want to use the word vulgar, but just open in terms of what the child is used to hearing from them. Dirty jokes kinds of things. It might be later when you get into things like the touch piece, it might be a little pinch on the bottom or making a comment about their bra and how their bra fits, kinds of things. Another P of grooming can be photo sharing. And so as the predator is filling out the child's responses to, you know, precocious conversation and praise and flattery, this is where they may send and this is a lot of this is for online grooming as well, but they may send a picture of themselves. I'll just be crass, a dick pic that is, you know, to see if the child will engage in some way, like that's gross, or why are you sharing this with me, or they may say, you've seen mine, now can I see yours? Kinds of things. And so then they are expecting a naked picture back, kinds of things. Most children want reassurance that they are beautiful with and without clothes on to feel better about themselves. And they don't even realize that that's causing them harm. You would be amazed at how many kids send pictures. We just had a situation in Kanawha County where a 15-year-old was catfished and sent some naked photos and then was blackmailed. And the child ended up dying by suicide. And so the harm is really, really there. Privacy is the next P. And so if you see that your child or a child that you are close to in a non-custodial way is being asked to keep a conversation a secret, that should raise a flag. We don't have secrets in my house. We have things that we keep private within our family. And that's very clearly defined. Like we don't talk about, dad's diarrhea or that kind of thing, or, mom's weird mole, but things that could hurt you or things that, if an adult asks you, can you keep a secret for me? The answer is no. And so that's something that my husband and I have taught our daughters over the course of their lifetime of you just don't share secrets for adults. An adult should never ask you for help. And an adult should never ask you to keep a secret for them. I mean, it might be something very innocent, like don't tell your mom, but I'm getting her this ring for Christmas. Do you want to see it? Can I get your opinion? That's a little bit different. But if it's a conversation that has parts of it that have been deleted by the time you read it, like in text messages or email, or snaps, be aware you may have missed grooming behavior and or sharing of images. Number 5 is pressure. And so this is blackmail. This is threats. This is, coming in all different ways, in all different directions, and what is called sextortion. The state of Kentucky just passed a very large sextortion bill, which is wonderful. We had talked here at the Department of Social Work, had talked about working with some of our local legislatures here in West Virginia to propose something similar. And I had a family emergency over the month of December and did not get that in time. But it is something that is on the radar with several of our faculty to try to promote something like that here in West Virginia too, because it's pretty strict. But the sextortion piece of it is when a child is asked to send a naked image and does, the predator is immediately going to ask for more images. And then they're going to threaten to expose them. And that's exactly what happened to, unfortunately, to that little fella at Nitro High School. Those images are shared. The threat is there. If you don't send me money, if you don't, have sex with me, if you don't get your friend to have sex with me, kinds of things, I'm going to share this with everybody and let them know. Or a lot of the times they're just shared on the dark web, on child sexual abuse media sites and adult sites. And again, sextortion. Another form of blackmail is when the predator requests money or they will expose. And that's what happened to the guy at Nitro, for everybody to see. This is a big predictor of suicide attempt or death by suicide with kids, as if this has happened. So please be aware of that. Presence, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. This is gifts, and it's used as trickery, meaning that if they win the trust of the child because they're not getting as close as they want to, this is a way to get in the good graces of a kid. So they might try to, get this private conversation. Praise isn't working. Precocious conversation isn't working. So then they start with gifts of big things like cell phones, jewelry, clothing, kinds of stuff, gift cards. And so if you start seeing weird packages come in the mail, or your child has extra Robux on Roblox, or they're getting, a new game for the gaming platform, where is that coming from and why? And if they say, my friend gave it to me, ask more questions about who that friend is. And then the final P is pulling away. And another form of grooming is through emotional or verbal abuse from the predator. So this is, they will reinforce to the child that they are the only ones who understand them and care about them. And that child should be making more and more time for them if they care for them too. And this is what Mr. Smith did to Julia. He isolated her so much. She had few friends to begin with. But by the time I graduated a year ahead of her, she maybe had one that we would see her with in the hall. Her free time was spent in his classroom. I believe she was even his teacher's aide when she was a senior. Nobody caught on to this. They were so secretive about it. But he was there every day. And a lot of the times the predator will threaten the child of, we're going to break up, or I'm not going to talk to you anymore if you don't give in to me and give in to the time that I need. So if you are seeing conversations that look possessive and feel like there's a sense of ownership in them of do this for me or else kind of mentality, that should be a red flag for you as well. It is 2:21, so I'm going to skip the online grooming video in this training, but I am happy to make a copy of the training available to Mission West Virginia if they want to share the PowerPoint, and you can click on the online grooming link. It is a long video that we don't have time for. But the thing about online grooming that I will say is it's a lot of those 7 P's. So it is sexual exploitation and grooming online, and 1 out of 4 minors experience this, and 2 out of 5 will engage in a conversation. This happened to my own kid. She's like, please, 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 please let me chat on Roblox. And I was like, I really don't want you to do that because you're a kid and you're innocent, and I don't want you to tell things about yourself that people who can identify you. She's very unique in her ethnicity, and she has a very unique name. And it wasn't 2 hours after I agreed to do this, she comes bebopping into my bedroom and goes, can I tell so-and-so this? And I said, who's so-and-so? She's like, well, I just met him online. I'm like, no, immediately shut it down. So I said, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Because what tends to happen with online grooming is these kids get in these chats and these private conversations, DMs, kinds of stuff. And the goal is to meet in person. And if you ever listen to podcasts, I know I've recommended a lot of documentaries. I listen to podcasts every day. And one of my favorite is Small Town Dicks, which is a podcast about across the United States. It's very entertaining, but there are a lot of police officers who come in there and talk about this exact thing happening, of how they will then, a parent will figure out this is happening. The police officer will then pretend to be the child and set up a meet. And there are some where they've shown up and the perpetrator has a van with a mattress, and it's party time. And so it's very similar to in-person grooming, but it's online. And so they are easily exploited. It's easy to happen, but the distinction is the lying piece of it. That child has no idea who this person is and what they really look like. And so it's very, very common that this happens. With the Delphi murders, one of the girls, Liberty, was talking to someone online, led it in a completely different direction to the guy, and he did not look like the picture. He was not the perpetrator of their murder, but he was trying to groom her online. So if you're seeing things like excessive messaging, telling the child to keep chats or conversations secret and delete them, ask if you see the child being asked questions, like if they're on the computer in the same room, or you can see their screen of, are you alone? Maybe sexual messages disguised as memes or questionnaires, kinds of things, or is it GIF or GIFs of things that can be interpreted. Again, this online seeking for personal information, where do you live? What are you doing? Where are you? Are you alone? Kinds of stuff. And then again, the whole picture piece of it. Because the goal of online sexual abuse is basically meeting in real life. And so they're doing all of these things. It could be on webcam or smartphone video. Having those sexual conversations are very gratifying to the perpetrator, but the ultimate goal is meeting in real life with the goal of sexual assault, rape, trafficking, or involuntary sex work, or even death. So I can't stress that enough. Just a few more things, some indicators of grooming, some immediate signs that you're going to see are things like secrecy, having an older boyfriend or girlfriend, preoccupation, distraction, dissociation, kinds of things that you see with sexual abuse of any kind, withdrawal, mood swings. They can't be without their phone. They don't want you to look at their phone. They hide the phone or get aggressive when you try to look at it. Suicidal thoughts or attempt, PTSD, over-sexualized behavior that is different than normal sexual development, curiosity and engaging in sexually behaviors, promiscuity, of things like unprotected intercourse happening, early sexual relationships, particularly with boys. They are more likely to engage in riskier behavior to cope and gain approval from their peers. Teen pregnancy, substance use, primarily alcohol, marijuana, or smoking and vaping. School performance tanks a lot of the times, and it always puts them for risk of higher other types of abuse. And finally, the long-term consequences of this, the correlation is substance dependence and long-term addiction. Mental health, such as conversion disorders, personality disorder development, anxiety and depression, and particularly complex PTSD. Eating disorders and obesity, risky sexual behavior of unprotected sex work, high numbers of partners that are not safe, STIs, poor relationship development, lack of trust, fear of intimacy, physical health issues that have either are mental health correlated, like gastrointestinal issues, but it could be, or cardiopulmonary kind of anxiety, panic attack things, but it could be STIs or long lasting things like infertility, HIV kinds of stuff, and sexual dysfunction. They may have pelvic pain, difficulty with arousal and desire, low risk perception for danger kinds of stuff, and sexual revictimization. Sexual assault is one of the strongest predictors of human trafficking. So it is just something that we have to be on top of all of the time. So that is the end. I have 2 minutes for questions. So I went the whole time.
You did great. I think all of us would agree. We could probably listen to this a lot longer. It's a lot of information. Good
Thank you.
information.
It is a lot of information. And like I said, Hillary, I'm happy to send you a copy of this PowerPoint. If you wanted to share it, that's fine, because it does have those hyperlinks to the video of Jan that we were able to watch, and then the video about online grooming. But that, if you want it, I'll send it. That's no big deal.
That would be great. We will
Sure.
definitely share any resources you have. There were a few questions that popped up, and I apologize if I don't get them all. One person asked if you offer a toolkit, or if you know of a toolkit maybe for resources to have a guided conversation in communities or small spaces for students and families, I think is the.
I don't, but I need to write one, don't I?
Apparently, there's a demand now.
Yeah. So
I'm sure you need one more thing on your to-do list, but.
Well, it won't be till after August because we're in reaffirmation right now. But actually, I was in talks with Cognella about creating an online toolkit that for coercive control and stalking, along with grooming behavior, and it just fell through because of my time. And so I'm not aware of one, but if I come across one, I'm happy to share with you, and you can pass along to everyone else. There's not a lot out there.
That would be great.
Not a lot.
Someone else asked, what about when young children molest or touch those younger than them? What do you think the chances of them having been touched or molested in the past would be?
Probably 100%. Where are they learning this behavior?
Right.
And it could be exposure to pornography or sexual media of some form that could be kind of kickstarting this curiosity, but I wouldn't say 100%. I shouldn't say 100%. Nothing's 100%. But the likelihood of them having been sexually abused in the past is really, really high. One of the families I started my social work career in the deep end in family preservation. And one of the families I worked with had 3 siblings who had been abused by a family member, an uncle, and then they would abuse each other. And the perpetrator, who was the most sadistic and pressured the most, was the youngest child. He was 5. He controlled the older 2 who were 8 and 10. And would make them do things to each other and to him. And I mean, if this kid's not in prison or dead, I would be amazed, because he was frightening. He was so manipulative and aggressive about it with his siblings. It was really, really heartbreaking. But that likelihood is very, very high. It's worth exploring.
There's a couple of people have shared some resources. They have missingkids.org. That is a great resource. We use that one here at work a lot. And an organization called Stop It Now.
Yep.
They've shared those. Okay. Next question. It seems like female perpetrators have increased in the last few years. Do you think it has actually increased in occurrence or just getting more attention in the media?
Getting more attention in the media.
I think that's a fair statement too.
Yes, definitely. My husband, God rest his soul, he and I went to the same high school, but we were 3 years apart, so we weren't there at the same time. But one of the things he talked about was how he played soccer for the school and how it was a rite of passage for every guy on the soccer team to have sex with the assistant coach, who was one of our English teachers. And that was in 1986. So this is always something that's happened. Female perpetrators have always been there, but they are now being noticed. We are acknowledging that they do it. Whereas before it was seen as this, well, she's just showing him the ropes. It's a rite of passage.
Yeah.
It's sexual.
Well, they wrote songs about it.
Right. She's only 16. But it is something that has always been there, but it is definitely getting more media attention. And I love that, because it is sexual abuse. And these boys that experience that, no, they're not being shown the ropes. They're being sexually traumatized.
Absolutely.
So,
okay. One more question was, is there anything that can be done on the prevention side to get perpetrators like the female teachers we're seeing or the teacher in your discussion away from the youth before they can cause harm?
that's a tough question, because they work so hard to hide it. A good example of this is Todd Rotze, who was the counselor at Pinch Elementary, who disclosed in his police interviews once he was caught that he chose his career so he could have access. So he had so there's long-term, this is not something that just happens because you spontaneously fall in love with someone. You have a student who is just this beautiful soul that they're your soul mate, split apart, whatever. These folks who are perpetrators develop paraphilia when they are about 3 or 4 years old. And that's when paraphilia hits. And so it either has a normal trajectory or it becomes some type of other type of paraphilia. That is, it could be a kink, it could be, running from I really like feet all the way up to I like children. And so if they have these feelings in puberty and they are developing over the course of time, they are planning way ahead of everybody else. It's not a spontaneous thing. And some of them don't realize it until they click, like, ooh, I'm attracted to that person. But if you go back and look at their histories, it's there. A lot of the times they've been abused. So in terms of prevention, it's more like, how can we prevent child sexual abuse from happening so they don't become perpetrators? Does that make sense?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's the thing, is we need to prevent them from being abused. So
Mm-hmm.
perpetrating and being exposed to things like the media and the algorithms and all of that, so that those things don't develop over the course of time.
We also have a request for a part 2. So
I
if you
don't
have
know
a
what
part,
I don't have a part 2. What
oh,
do you
well,
want me to talk about? I
just
teach
more.
family balance all the time. I do have another training that I can talk about, that it's not about child sexual abuse. It's probably not for Mission, West Virginia, but it is violence training. I do a lot of ethics training. So
Mhm.
I could do ethics, which are about boundaries and dual relationships. And we talk about that with social workers, of how they can get in those situations as well. But I also have one about extremists and violence and the algorithmic piece of that, and how young men are often drawn to really scary, like white supremacist and ultra violent groups
Mhm.
through their
Oh,
algorithms and a lot of incel behavior. So
oh,
I
wow.
don't know what the part 2 on this would be, but I'm happy to talk about it with suggestion.
Well, you will be hearing from me
Okay,
soon.
happy to do that. But I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you for attending. I'm not sure how many of you are out there, but it's been a
My
pleasure.
last count I saw was 129. So,
Oh, wow,
um,
that's fantastic. I would like to
yes,
see if you could, if you could give me a summarization of the evaluations. I would very much appreciate
absolutely.
that. I go up for promotion at the end of the month, so
Oh, well, glowing
if
recommendations from over here. So,
I can throw that in the mix. So
yeah,
um,
absolutely.
that's just one more thing to get me some more money.
Okay. So if you're still on here and still listening, go complete your evaluations. There's a
Yes,
link
please.
to that in the chats.
Yes. It's well, the feedback is important, so I can tweak
Mhm.
things or make things different or make things more understandable. As an educator, that's really important too. Not just getting promoted, but making sure that people are getting the information they need for their jobs,
Exactly. Well,
and how to
you do an
protect
amazing job.
our kids. That's
Yes.
important.
Well,
So,
we appreciate you every time we get an opportunity to hear you present and share your
well, thank you.
knowledge.
I'm sure I'll be back. I would like to be
I
back.
would love that. I would love that. Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's joined us today.
Yes.
I'm not seeing any more questions. If I missed something, if you want to pop the question up real fast, but I'm getting some thumbs up. I think
We're good to go.
we're okay.
All right,
Yeah.
I'm going to go get my girl from school.
All right. I'm going to head that way myself.
I'm
Thank
headed
you
I'm
again.
headed from Huntington to Charleston.
Oh
Ugh.
gosh,
I
that
know.
is a drop.
That's the only part of my job I don't like is the
Mm,
drive. But thank you again for the opportunity. I appreciate everybody being here, and I'm happy to
thank
come
you. This
back.
was great.
Thank you.
Great. We will see you soon.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Trying
day.
to figure out, my mouse quit working. So if you hang
Oh,
up, it should knock everything off.
it
Oh,
sure
there we go.
will.
There we go. Stop sharing. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.